So what exactly happens when a massive digital movement suddenly stalls? When that crazy viral momentum just kind of slows down, the likes stop pouring in at that same dizzying rate, and the actual real-world limits of internet hype become totally undeniable? Well, that is absolutely the central problem we're going to explore today.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating case study drawn from some recent political commentary analyzing Australia's One Nation Party. And look, regardless of where you might personally sit on the political spectrum, this analysis offers an absolute masterclass in modern political mechanics. It really digs into this jarring disconnect we're seeing between staggering online engagement and real-world, on-the-ground political realities. We're going to look at what happens when a party hits a statistical ceiling, the frankly wild and deceptive nature of social media engagement farms, and most importantly, how a movement has to transition from just getting passive digital cheers to doing the gritty, everyday labor of genuine grassroots advocacy.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. Number 1, the online engagement illusion. 2, analyzing the polling data. 3, the limits of passive support. 4, advocating for grassroots change. And 5, holding representatives accountable.
Starting right off with Section 1, the online engagement illusion, or what the source accurately describes as the digital mirage of support.
To really wrap our heads around this digital landscape, the source highlights a very specific investigation by The Guardian looking into pro-One Nation Facebook groups. This investigation revealed that many of these massive booming groups appear to be run by foreign meme factories that are just looking to monetize content. Now, the natural knee-jerk reaction in the political sphere is to immediately cry foul, right? To assume it's malicious foreign interference. But the commentary we're analyzing today points out a crucial and honestly entirely different reality about how modern social media actually functions.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The source draws this super clear distinction between two wildly different internet phenomena. On the right side, you've got traditional foreign interference campaigns. Think state-funded political disinformation campaigns that are deliberately built to sway elections. But over on the left, we have what is actually happening here: for-profit engagement farms. According to the analysis, these pages are predominantly being run out of Southeast Asia in places like Indonesia and India, and they're literally just using AI to figure out what topics are hot. They aren't funded by some shadowy foreign government. They are run by everyday digital creators who just realized that posting positively about this specific Australian political party generates massive clicks. And in today's digital economy, clicks equal ad revenue. The politics are completely divorced from the profit.
To put this into perspective, the source points to a highly specific example. There's this Facebook page falsely claiming to be run by federal MP David Farley. The administrator? Totally fake. It's an engagement farm. But here's the catch. The page has over 135,000 active members. And the source notes that researchers found that people engaging, commenting, and joining are overwhelmingly genuine, established Australian accounts. So even though the supply of the content is this cynical, zero-value monetization grab, the massive audience demand is entirely real. It validates that there is a genuine, enormous base of interest out there, even if they're being corralled into artificial digital spaces.
This brings us nicely to Section 2, analyzing the polling data, where we really need to look at the difference between a statistical plateau and a total collapse.
So recently, these media narratives started circulating that this political movement was just completely collapsing. But to understand why the source totally rejects this idea, we have to zoom out for a second. The emphasizes context. At the last federal election, the party sat at a 6.6% baseline nationwide. Over the last year, they experienced a staggering, genuinely historic rise, surging by approximately 20 percentage points to sit comfortably in the mid-20s. I mean, that kind of rapid, massive shift essentially turns a traditional two-party system into a three-party contest overnight.
But here is what happened over the last few weeks. The source aggregates several polls showing a consistent, albeit fairly small dip. The Redbridge and Essential polls showed a 2% decline, and the Roy Morgan poll showed a slightly larger 5.5% drop. Naturally, political opponents seized on these dips as solid proof that the dream was dead. However, the source argues that mathematically, calling a 2% or even a 5% dip a collapse right after a verified 20% rise is, well, it's just illogical. A 2% dip is basically within a standard margin of error. What we're actually looking at here, the analysis suggests, isn't a crash at all. It is just a natural statistical plateau.
Which perfectly leads us into Section 3, the limits of passive support, and exactly why political movements inevitably hit a ceiling.
So, if it's just a plateau, why did it happen? The source explains this through the concept of the low-hanging fruit.
You see, in any political landscape, there are swing voters, people who are disillusioned and actively out there looking for a new political home. They're relatively easy to convince. The commentator argues that this party's massive 20% surge was simply the result of successfully harvesting all of that low-hanging fruit. They soaked up the easy votes, but once those swing voters are captured, the easy part is officially over. Trying to change minds from that point forward requires breaking through to rusted-on, lifelong voters, which is exponentially harder to do.
And this brilliantly illustrates our main focus for today, Section 4, Advocating for Grassroots Change. Because once the internet hype peaks and all those easy votes are gathered up, the only way forward is the earthy, everyday labor of real politics.
To tackle this, the source outlines a highly practical 3-step playbook for how everyday supporters must transition from being passive fans to active political operators. Step 1, actually join a local branch. Step 2 is where it gets gritty, doing the administrative paperwork. Look, opponents will look for literally any excuse to undermine a movement, so you absolutely need competent people keeping everything perfectly in order. And step 3, help pre-select candidates. Because if you want better representation, you have to actually be in the room where they are chosen.
This quote from the commentary really hits the nail on the head. Our apathy is what got us into this mess in the first place. The source makes a really passionate case here that simply clicking like on a Facebook page, especially one that might literally just be an Indonesian AI farm monetizing your attention, achieves absolutely nothing. Even just being a financial member who pays dues but never actually shows up is no longer enough. To break through that polling ceiling, supporters have to step away from their keyboards and apply their real-world life and professional skills to the actual day-to-day functioning of their local political branches.
Finally, we reach Section 5, Holding Representatives Accountable. What exactly happens when all this grassroots labor actually works? So, what happens when you win? Well, the source outlines the dual responsibility of the grassroots advocate. First, you have to provide the actual structural support needed to govern. You can't just throw up your hands and criticize the moment they take office, but simultaneously, you must hold their feet to the fire. The source warns of the Canberra bubble, that dangerous tendency for well-meaning politicians to arrive in the capital, get totally absorbed by the system, and just forget their promises. Grassroots advocates have to constantly shine sunlight into those dark places, making sure that the people they worked so incredibly hard to elect remain strictly accountable to their base. As we wrap up this explainer, the analysis leaves us with a pretty stark reality check. The flashy era of viral growth and easy polling wins, it's over. The digital noise, filled to the brim with AI engagement farms and sensationalist media, is ultimately just a distraction. The real battle is now firmly on the ground. So, the question the source ultimately poses to anyone seeking genuine political transformation is this: are you ready to step away from the digital noise and do the dusty, tedious, everyday work of genuine grassroots change? Because according to this analysis, that is the only way real change ever actually happens. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the noise around you.